on me, yeah. When you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on.
Hello, Chris, and welcome to the first episode of Eduardo Live Empowering Monday. Could you please tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Chris Dyer. I'm the author of The Power of Company Culture. I have another book coming out here next year called Remote Work. And I regularly consult and work with people or companies with their culture, remote work. And I also have several other businesses that I run as well.
When I lecture, I use a lot of the things that you write about because I think it's so essential, like the part of motivation and the pillars, And what I have learned now is that one of the things that I noticed that companies didn't understand company culture, because for some leaders, when I asked them, what does this mean? Somebody said like after work, they couldn't relate to this as a strategy and when what you do so good, I think, like with your book, when you define the pillars, that it becomes actually measurable. And they can really easily understand when I go through them and explain to them how this relate to the organization. Then they can really start to grasp like, oh, this should equally be as important as digital transformation or anything like. So that is my preaching now, is that I say that company culture should be part of the strategy and it should be equally important. So I leave over to you, Chris. Tell us about how came that you wrote this awesome book. Like, where did it start for you?
Well, it really began out of necessity, like anything that's probably good or that we do as human beings, right? We see a need and we do something about it. And for me, I realized that my company, we were okay. We were doing fine. We weren't, focusing on these things. But then the recession of 2009 hit in the United States, and that we had to retool the company. We had to restructure it. We had to think about not only how are we going to survive the recession, but when we came out of that recession, how could we be better as a company? And so I said, well, I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to change the company. And then I said, well, great. Then what am I supposed to change it to? Like, if we're not doing the right thing, then what is the right thing? And it became very obvious that it wasn't such a clear answer, or at least nobody had really formulated it into a very clear answer. And so I started this process of reading hundreds of books and talking to thousands of leaders and, private conversations and podcasts and, and seeing what they were doing and talking to them about what they thought was important and what did the leaders that they admired, what did they talk about, right? So there's a lot of these questions, and I had to kind of get through some of the BS, some of the crap, a lot of things that people said you were supposed to do that wasn't real. I had to kind of dig a little deeper to find the real things. And so what I found was, amongst all the books and all the interviews and all that information, there were very clear things that people did in good companies, and even clearer things that they did in great companies. So it's really easy for someone to have a very good service or a very good product or something that the consumer really wants, right? And you can get away with not having particularly wonderful culture, because if everybody wants your widget, everybody wants your car, everybody wants your whatever that thing is, right? For a while, you can get away with not thinking about these things because you have this cool product or service that, people care about. At some point that catches up with you and you have to do it differently. And you'll notice that those companies can be really good. They can be a good company for a while. A lot of founders, a lot of CEOs they're not human focused. They might be very technical focused. They might be more engineers or inventors or computer scientists. They might have a completely different lens on the business. And that's okay, as long as they take the human part and give it to somebody else to deal with, because it must be dealt with, even though they're not the ones to maybe really utilize that strategy. So what I found in all my research was good companies were doing some of the best things. They were doing some things good, but they weren't necessary. And if they were a unique or very specialized or really popular product or service, they weren't doing enough either. And then maybe they were in a very commoditized market. Maybe they were selling something that people want but don't really care about who they buy it from. Car insurance, or you can name lots of different things that there's a lot of competition. They had to do more things right from a culture standpoint to be competitive. But ultimately, if we look at who are the best of the best, it turns out the best companies, the absolute greatest companies that we admire, we talk about all the time, that are just the industry standard, the industry leader, the cool, sexy, awesome company that we all wish we were in or a part of or had somehow built, they do all of the things right around culture. And regardless of whether or not their product or service is super sexy or super awesome or whatever. And for me, that was a big lesson to say, wow, not only are they the top, but it's because they're doing these things. And so I had to formulate what those things were, and then I started implementing them into my company.
I think my first book that for me was defined how I should look at business, or how I should look at building a company, was actually Good to Great. That was for me, it was the Bible for still today. I think it's one of the most important book I ever read, but it focused a lot on the leadership, what it should be. And there are so many good things about that book, but also when I read your book that focused more on the culture. And for me, I truly believe that company culture should be a strategy, but I still notice this thing when I talk to some companies or leaders, that they have a hard time to grasp why is it a power, why is a company culture? How do you see that when you talk to people, not the good, to great, not the great, but the good? How can they understand this, and why don't they understand it, some of the leaders in these companies?
Well, again, it goes back to that point about who is that leader. And so let's just say that leader is highly technical. They can understand code and programming, and maybe their product is something to do in the world of IT, right, or something. It's pretty hard for me to try to convince them to do a lot of these things. Now, I may be able to help them understand the value, and then they have to bring in a chief people officer or a CHRO or somebody like that to execute the strategy. I can show them that if they do these things, they will have higher profits, better productivity, higher performance. They'll get a better talent pool, right? But them understanding that that's important is different than them wanting to do or being able to execute the strategy. So very quickly, I have to decide, are they this sort of people person? Are they this, more human focused, leader, or are they more of a technical leader who has a technical competency? Maybe the ones who invented, if you think of someone who invented some really cool piece of machinery that did something really awesome, right? That doesn't necessarily make them equipped or have the experience on how to manage people. Right? They're very good at something technical, not necessarily management-wise. And so you need a complementary person or people in your organization to help you do that stuff.
Yeah, that is the thing. I'm an engineer in the ground, but I'm very people oriented, and when I started to write on a book, let's say it was 3-4 years ago, more about my life and my burnout experience. But the more I write on the book, the more I wrote about organizations and how I view organization within digital, where I always been working, and the revelation I came to was that they were thinking from a wrong perspective, because how they should think, according to me, is that they should think people first, process second, technology third, but they were doing it in reverse, And for me, I was so amazed, because as I see it, this is what I'm writing about in the digital culture, is that I say that as long as people are buying and using and hating the products, what the company should care about is these people. And as long as it's people that are doing this product and not robots with passion, with heart, the one that should matter is these people, So how I analyze like the whole spectrum of the digital industry, it's about people, and people still, some companies still believe, and these consultants within digital transformation, they think like it's about digitalizing, but it's a mindset. For me, as I see it, it's a mindset that we need to realize that it's the user that matter and should be in the center. And to be able to do that, you need to put company culture equally as important. And that is what I have hard time why they don't do. It's like I don't know. I have so hard time with understanding.
I mean, think about what you just said, right? People, process, and technology. If you ordered those things in importance, you're right. If you ordered those things and how easy is it to implement and to do, well, getting a piece of technology is the easiest thing you can do. You can go and open up Salesforce or go get some technology and implement it in your company. And that's pretty easy. Coming up with a good process is harder than getting a piece of technology, but not as hard as people. People is the hardest thing because it's not uniform. You're not talking about one strategy no matter what. If you have a company that is very technical and full of engineers and programmers, your culture and your people look totally different than you have a customer service based, maybe you're selling shoes, maybe you're selling, legal advice, maybe, who knows, a service to a product. So it really changes. Now, it's funny, I do my monthly book club, and we read a book this month, and it reminded us a lot of the lessons of the Tao Te Ching. And we were sort of discussing about how, here thousands of years ago, Eastern philosophy has really figured out most of the truths in the world, right? And maybe 2 or 3 months ago, we reread Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and then here's Western philosophy has already figured it out thousands of years ago, right? And you put these two things together, and you have the ultimate book for all the answers that you would ever need to make yourself better, right? And yet, most people have not read those books. Most people could not quote you anything from there, right? And so the question is why? Well, we don't value that. We don't teach that, right? We want to teach the newest, coolest thing because we can charge for that, because it sounds good, whatever. So, if we want to get to a deep philosophical discussion about why, it's probably because it's not valued in school. It's not the first thing that we talk about in school, these lessons that we already know and how to handle people.
Yeah, I always wonder about that. I do a lot of mindfulness. That was the thing that helped me a lot coming back from the burnout, but it also helped me to be a better man, a better leader, a better colleague, to be more reflective, to be more in touch with like my feelings, right? And I truly believe that if more people did mindfulness or like these kind of practices, we will have less angry people in the world. I truly believe that, and what amazes me most is that all of this knowledge come from, like you say, it's been there for like thousands of years, and these all smart people, like highly intelligent with these fancy titles, they don't get it. It's like they're looking at other aspects, the same with what you're saying, like with companies that don't understand that it's the people, like it's the users that should matter. And I came in my research, I came with some interesting things. One example, this one you will think is really funny, that they did some study with with people that could meet the client, to meet the users, like programmers that met users. And they realized that if a programmer could meet the user, they will have more motivation, they will have more alignment with the product than when they never met the user. Now, what's interesting with this is that since I started the industry 20 years ago, everybody has been saying the team should meet the user. And it never happens. It never happens. For me, it's like, why is it so hard for some of these companies to align into being close to the user, listen to or maybe invite a user to the company to lecture, how do they feel about the product?
Yeah, and there's a lot to untangle there. I mean, not all opinions are good opinions, right? Not all users represent your best client. I mean, so there's a lot
No.
to in there, but I think, for me, and to your original question, if we're going to go approach someone who's maybe not taking a people focused approach, it's not about convincing them that they should focus on their people first, that they're going to prioritize what's best for them. What I try to do is to get them to understand that this is more of a Venn diagram, right? People, process, and technology all overlap each other, and they're all important. But it's in the people part that will get them their biggest reward, their biggest gains, right? Their most success. If they focus on that right now as their number one priority, they will have the largest growth. And once they get that in there, and if they can institute programs and institute, policies and everything for their company to continue to work on that over time, they will continue to have success in that area, right? And the difference is that no one is going to create a people process for you. People create new technology all the time, and you can choose to buy it or not buy it. People come up with new processes, and you can learn those or read those books, and you can implement them or not. But how your people function is a purely selfish thing you have to take control of as the leader of the organization, and that's squishy, and that's weird, and that's not. It's very subjective, and it's and so it takes a little bit of work, and that's why in my book I was really hoping to give them somewhat of a blueprint. I'm not telling people that they have to do A, B, and C, and this is exactly how you do it. I'm saying you have to think about these 7 things and identify if you're really doing really, really well in 3 of those 7, then great. Don't worry about those. Just keep those going. And now out of the 4 that you're doing not so good at, which one are you doing the worst in? Which one is the biggest problem for you? And that's where you should go and spend time to get way better. And if they do that, 99.999% of the time, they get hooked. They realize. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say that they realize transparency is an area that their company does not do a good job in. They're not transparent with their employees. They're not transparent with clients or vendors or anybody else. So they go, cool, let's go be transparent. How do we do that? And I give some suggestions in the book. Sharing your financials, sharing goals across company departments, right? Everyone on the team should know what everyone else's team's goals are, because sometimes we don't realize it, but people's goals can actually be conflicting. And then that's why tension is happening. But you start sharing goals, sales goals, customer service goals, your profit and loss statements, your financials with your team. All of a sudden, these incredible ideas start coming up. People have ideas for new ventures. People have ideas to save money. People don't realize that they were conflicting with somebody else on a goal, and they get those realigned. And you have this mind-blowing experience as a leader going, all I did was tell them what I knew. I didn't take any effort. I didn't have to buy anything. I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was be honest and tell them things, even if they weren't easy things to tell them, and watch the company just take off in a really, really good way. So, it's that kind of exercise that companies have to do if they want to be a great company culture. And let's just say they don't want to be great. If they want to maintain being good for a long period of time, they're still going to have to do these things as well.
In the current company I'm working in at Framtid in Norway, like this big insurance company that started 1 year ago by 2 banks. I like when I have I'm part of we call it the culture embassy actually, and we have a head of people and culture. That's the common role today, and there is actually 2 of your pillars there that I have a really strong alignment with. I really love your positivity pillar, because for me that's what this is usually what I do. Like when I take a team on board, or when I have to build a new team, or when I do something with people that I need to lead a group, I start with positivity, because what I experienced in life is that, as you describe in the book, that it's easier to solve problems when we have a positive mindset, right? And I see that so many like teams or like companies, they don't see like how powerful positivity is, for the growth, because you get this kind of mindset that you're more oriented to solve problems because you're thinking from a positive perspective. It doesn't mean that, oh, we will fix all the problems in the world, but it means that you have a clarity of not falling into negativity that I notice sometimes some teams, they do, like people start to fight, and they don't regulate the balance. So everybody, the team like falls apart. Nobody wants to talk with each other. I've seen that happen in some, not in this company, but I've seen it before, And what they did in that case when this team was falling apart is that they brought a Scrum coach that was going to teach them to work better with Scrum, when actually the team was not fully aligned with each other, And that is what I always say, that it's people first, process second. Like, start with the people, and then you can look at the other issues. Because it's not like Scrum that makes people happy, like, oh, I will go to work today because we have this new Google Design Sprint process that we're doing, right? You're going there for the culture. That is what makes people happy, And the second revelation I had with your pilot was the transparency one. And it was that when we hit COVID, 1,000 people almost was sent to home, like in one day. And our company was really good at telling what was happening, And I felt that in my heart, that I really appreciated that. And I felt so aligned with our company, because their problems I felt was my problem, because they have given me that feeling from the beginning, like, you're part of us, you're part of this like family, this company, And I always felt that in that company. And the only thing, as I see it, that you can create that is with like company culture. It's the only way, and it must be a strategy, like very important. So that was the pilot experiences that I had. I had more actually, but those two are the one I like most now, is transparency and positivity, because they are so underrated, I believe, from my experience. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and positivity. So transparency is probably the easiest one to do. Easy in the sense that there's nothing you really have to learn or do. It's just being comfortable with doing it. You may have to deal with some of the effects of being transparent. People generally take it very well. Sometimes people need some coaching or work or explanations. But that one's pretty easy to do if you're willing to do it. The positivity one really wraps around the entire methodology of what's called appreciative inquiry. And so to be good at positive leadership and positivity inside the organization actually it's actually a process. So it is a fairly, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's not like something that's, when we say positivity, we're not saying just be nicer. We're not saying think everything is awesome. I mean, we're talking about an actual methodology where you do things like bring in the, dream design. There's this whole like process, this 4D process where you can look at problems or look at things. So actually the first thing to do is to stop calling them problems, right? So a problem is inherently negative. Yes. And so if a customer calls me and says, "Hi, Chris, I'm mad," I could say, "Well, what's the problem?" Right? Or if they send me an email and "Well, I'm really mad about this thing," and I could get my team together and say, "Well, we have a problem." It's all negative. Instead, what I say is, "Oh, well, thank you, client, for contacting me. I have an opportunity now to help my client. I have an opportunity to learn. I have an opportunity to hear them. I have an opportunity to interact with them. And I possibly have the opportunity to not only help them be happy, but maybe to make them even happier than they thought they could be." So the general premise of appreciative inquiry is that in a traditional problem-solving model, if my client calls me and says, "I'm mad," I think, how do I get them back to where they were right before they were mad? Right? So maybe there's this much of a difference. So they were mad, they weren't mad, now they're mad. How do I get them back here, right? How do I bridge this small gap? In appreciative inquiry, I say, tell me what's going on, help me understand the process, and I go deeper, right? And I ask them questions like, well, in the perfect world, how would this look, and what would we be doing differently, and what else could we be doing to help you? And so by doing that, I have found clients that gave me great ideas that I could use for other clients and make more money. I've had clients tell me things and I go, oh, well, did you know we have this other product or service? Oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, well, and so I could sell them more things. So not only did they go from this, they're here to here. Well, now I took them, way farther. And I wasn't just trying to get them back to the status quo. I was trying to explore where else can we go and take this. It doesn't always happen, and that's okay. But I can't tell you, I have had experiences with clients in the past before we started doing this where you leave the conversation and you're not sure, are they okay? Are they going to leave you? Are they, what's going on? We now have the situation where clients thank us. So they start off being angry, right? Because something's late or they didn't like how something was done. And we go through this process with them. And when we're done, they say, wow, thank you so much for talking to me. This is so awesome. I'm really excited we can do this thing. And it still blows my mind that we took them from angry to thanking us in one conversation. And so that's the power of positivity. That's the power of thinking about how we can do that. Now, that's in an interaction on a problem basis. The other thing that positivity brings us is the ability to measure things properly and to look at creating new and sort of cool ways to maybe develop new processes or innovations. There's a thing called positive deviance, which is there something good happening inside the data pool of negative things? Simple example would be, let's say that 10 or 11 out of 12 of your customer service people are not making the call or not handling the calls and getting the satisfaction ratings that you like. So 11 out of 12 are not meeting your standards, right? Customers are not happy with them. They're on the phone too long. They're not great. But positive deviance says, well, what about that 1 out of 12? What's that one person doing really well, right? And let's go back and talk to them. Let's study them. And so it's really easy for a leader to go back and yell at the whole team, send the whole team to training, fire the whole team, get a whole new team, right? Because there's 11 out of 12 are failing. I go back to the 1 and say, how do you do your job? Why are you successful? What's happening? What are you doing that's different? And you'll find generally all the secrets you need. They go, well, I have 2 monitors, and you find out the rest of your team doesn't have 2 monitors. Or I always bring up my screen and I align things this way so I can move through them quickly, right? I always take 5 minutes after every call to document everything so I'm ready for the next, whatever these little secrets are. And then you take that and you teach that to the rest of the team. And 9 times out of 10, that solves it, right? It didn't take more training. It didn't take more money. It didn't take new people. It was, what is that one person doing that's awesome that we could teach to everybody else? And that's another way that positive leadership or appreciative inquiry can just radically impact your organization.
I love that example, man. You actually did a nugget now. I'm involved in the Golden Nugget project. I don't know if you heard about it. To share like this kind of small wisdoms. And for me, that was a nugget because you actually said, talk to the one succeeding or something like that, like talk to the one doing it right. That's an amazing nugget. I love that one. I also like the part from your book, like ending a meeting with something positive. I really like that one because that is so easy for everybody to understand, And I think what I have noticed when I lecture or when I do my like publish my articles on this kind of topics, usually the question I get from like companies or that are not so much into it, but they are very curious that like, where do we begin? Like, who should do it? Like should we hire a head of people culture, or could HR do it? Or like, where do a company start that find what you're doing is important and they want to do it? Like, what do you say to them? Like, how should they start? Like from square zero, they have no knowledge about this. They haven't done anything similar before. They only done some off the works that they consider to be company culture.
Yeah, again, I think it's about going back to figuring out what they're really good at. Right? That's the first place to start. What are we really good at as an organization? Whether it's our product or service or it's our people stuff, Certainly you can use my pillars as a good gauge to like, what are the things you should be trying to determine what you're good at. But even if it's just a general conversation, first start with what you're good at, and then make sure you do more of that, right? That's the first thing. Do more of that stuff because you're good at it. Now identify what you're not so good at, and then decide, do we need help? Do we need a consultant? Do we need another employee? Do we need training? Do we just need to think about it as a team and come up with solutions, come up with ideas? And, if what I have surveyed, I go and work with companies and I'll survey the people in advance, and I'll maybe ask them, what do you guys do well? And I'll ask them, what are you guys struggling with? And I had an organization recently, and I went in and did some training, and they all said, what we don't do well is that we're on way too many meetings, right? And there's no agenda. Like, we're on all these meetings all the time. There's no agenda. And that's we feel like we communicate well and we get a lot done, but like, it's a real source of frustration for them that there was no agendas and there's too many meetings. So we went in and we talked about it. I trained them. I told them everything, and they came up on their own with 2 really good takeaways, which I do in my organization as well already, which was, if there's not an agenda, then there's no meeting. So they all agreed, if there's not an agenda in the meeting, no one shows up, no one goes. Okay, real simple. So if you call a meeting, it's your responsibility to put the agenda together. And if you can't do that, then no one's going to be at your meeting, right? So they all agreed that was going to be a legitimate response to a no agenda meeting, is no one shows up. And the second thing was that certain meetings needed to be optional for people. Not all meetings need to be mandatory. There are status updates, there are stand-ups, there are different types of meetings that are not, great. If you can make it, great. But if you're too busy and you need to take this one off, take it off, right? Go get your work done. And you can come back tomorrow and we'll fill you in, or we'll send you the meeting notes and you can catch up later. So those 2 ideas solved their issue, and it was just a matter of talking about it, right? And just figuring out where they were struggling.
That is like the second phrase I have that I heard since I started the industry. The first one was like, oh, we should meet the client. The second one is meeting culture. Since I started, that's an expression that like never comes to it never comes to an end. It's always the same topic, like meeting culture. I actually did a workshop together with some other colleagues regarding company culture for some of the leaders in our company within digital, and we actually used your pillars, and I was really amazed how fast they grasped them, and how fast they really appreciated them, because they started to understand, that this is so, how can I say, it's so aligned with any kind of company or any kind of organization, to put these pillars so clearly. So I think that's, but when I talk about digital culture, I also talk about a pillar that I think is critical for digital companies to have. And that is one that I call the adaptability or flexibility, because what I have noticed from these digital companies, especially the companies that became digital that were not digital from the beginning, like banks, for example, they started to become this digital provider of banking solutions, right? And what happened is that they started to use expression like disruption. Oh, it's a disruption, these companies or startup, And I explained to them that it's part of the digital ecosystem. It goes so fast. Anybody can use the technology. So if a company don't implement a mindset of adaptability, I mean, like everybody in the company should be ready to shift gear, because that is what technology is doing now. It's going in all directions, and we need to stick along, right? So, and what I have noticed in these companies is that usually the engineers, okay, they like the thing with the users, but usually they are very oriented to learn new things, right? But people that come from other type of schools, that they thought that, oh, we learned this in university and now we don't need to learn anymore, we can just work, right?
Right.
They didn't understand that, hey, that's not life anymore. You need to learn all your life, right? So I see this kind of frustration where they don't really understand that they must. There was some like book about this called like change mindset or growth mindset, something like that. But
Carol
but
Dweck,
what I
growth
yeah,
mindset. Yeah.
growth mindset. So what I say to companies is that they, in the digital, if you're going to live, if you want to enter this digital arena, you know, and you want to live there, you need to have like this change mindset, you know, like everybody in the company must have it. And not only that, you know, that Jim Collins, he wrote that get the right people in the bus, get the wrong people out of the bus, and put the right people in the right seat of the bus. Now, what I say is that in the digital world, you need to do that in every stop. That's a big difference, right? It means that it goes so fast that people must be willing to change work, like titles, you know. And people
Yeah.
are so in love with their role and their title, you know. Like, but the whole digital monster is like this kind of blob, you know. It goes in all directions. We can't have people that are not willing to maybe go down one step or to the side, or that is my kind of analysis of what I called, when I say digital culture. The digital part is actually what I talked about right now.
Yeah, and it's still a human thing, right? People still need to know what's in it for them. We do have people that are lifelong learners. You do have that, you know, certain group of people that will be willing to learn things all the time. But if you want someone to change, you want someone to think about getting better all the time in your organization, they need to know what's in it for them. You know, when you go to college, the promise is, I learn this stuff, I get a degree, I get a job, I get a better paying job, right? I have a career and all these things. So if you want people to learn something in their job, they have to see what it's going to do for them. Maybe it makes their life easier. Maybe it makes their work easier. Maybe it's a possibility of promotion. Maybe it's more money. Maybe it's, you know, a career advancement. I mean, they have to know that, and it has to be very clear. And this is an area that leaders fail at. They think it's obvious. They think that their employees understand that and that they can see the direct correlation to what's in it for them. And yet, if you ask most of them, they don't know. They don't see it. They're too busy doing their work, right? They have a family, they've got bills, they're doing their work, and they don't see how, if I read this extra book or do this extra thing, that it's going to have an impact on me. There was a book I read recently, and I'm forgetting which one it was. I always like to give credit where credit's due, but if I think of it, I'll tell you. But it was this thing about 10-10-10, which is, you know, if I make this decision, how will it impact me in 10 minutes? How might it impact me in 10 months? And how would it impact me in 10 years? Right? So doing a little bit of learning may not impact you in that first 10 minutes. Now, you do a little bit of learning all the time and trying to make yourself better. You know, in 10 months, that's pretty substantial. And in 10 years, you may have a whole new career. You might be doing something totally different and awesome that, you know, are making way more money or whatever it may be. It's the same thing for bad decisions, right? You smoke a cigarette, well, the first 10 minutes, you might feel slightly better. And in 10 months, you're going to have a lot less money and all your clothes are going to smell. And in 10 years, you might have cancer, right? So, I mean, those decisions are varied, and you could think about them in that 10-10-10 type of a category. But people think about that way too with learning. Is this going to do anything for me right now? Most of the time, the answer is probably not. It's going to be something for you to maybe use in the next 10 months. And it's a struggle for people to want to use a part of their energy and their mind to do that. We only, as human beings, can make so many decisions a day. We each have a limit on how many decisions we can make every day. This is why some of the most brilliant people in the world, you know, like Steve Jobs, wore the same outfit every day. And that's not because he liked that outfit. It's because he didn't have to decide what to wear that day. He cut out one decision. I also know, I have a friend who, her mom owned a diner, and Steve Jobs was in there almost every day for years, and he had the same lunch every single day. It's another decision he didn't have to make. So if you can cut down decisions, it allows you to spend more time making other decisions or opportunities to learn and to think, because our brain is sort of, it's capped. And it's not exactly the same for everyone, but it's all kind of close. So if you spend your day making that hundreds and thousands of these tiny little decisions that don't matter, you have no capacity to do anything else valuable when it comes along.
When I started my first venture, one of the things I learned from a mentor, he said to me that, Eduardo, the key to success is to be able to say no, he said. And for me, it was like this eureka moment when he said that, because I realized I have been this kind of person that was never questioning. I was just running, right? And I had all these balls that I shouldn't have, also one of the reasons that I did a burnout. Do you believe that we humans are not trained to handle feelings and reflect? Because that is something I notice when it's regard how people interact in companies, that they go usually on the autopilot. And I noticed that once I started to understand mindfulness more and more, and I started to exercise on meditation and reflection techniques, to stop that feeling. And because what I did before that, somebody sent me an angry email and I was like, whoa, and then I sent even angrier back, right? We had this kind of stupid interaction that led nowhere, right? And nobody thought about stopping and reflecting. The same goes with positivity. Do you think that maybe these kind of things that we should learn but we don't learn in school about people's psychology, how do we function?
Yeah, I think it's a lack of learning, right? So we don't know what we don't know. So whether or not we're capable, I think we are, but we maybe aren't exposed to these things as much as we should be. But there's definitely there's so many parts to this that it's really hard to decide, well, which is the right thing that you should be doing all the time, which is the right approach into that. But what I have seen, what I've from a lot of the stuff that I've read, is that we are a communal, tribal type of a species. And so we get a lot of our sort of value and our connection through being in groups of people. And this is one of the reasons why I've been advocating, especially with all this remote work going on right now, is for leaders to stop having one-on-one calls with their people all the time. There are those certain situations you have to do it, but you should not be in that position, first of all, to waste that much time to be on all these one-on-one calls all the time. Number two, that you're somehow responsible for everyone's feelings and to be their boss, psychiatrist, parent, everything. This is just, it's too much. But more importantly, if you put people into a group instead, right, and you have a group call with 5 people and say, how's everyone doing? How are you showing up? What's going on in your life? And the group talks together. That's how we want to meet anyways. We want to be in groups. We want to be in communities. We want to have our little tribes. And those 5 people can empathize and sympathize and give strategies and advice and words of comfort, right, in such higher magnitude than one leader can. So I think it's far better to put us into these groups, right? Let the group have that power instead of it just being left to the individual all the time.
I love that one. I know that you do a lot of things regarding remote work, and I know you have a lot of experience going remote actually many years ago. Could you please share us some of your background on how that started and some insights, what one should think about, what have you discovered about remote work?
Well, we went remote back in 2009 when I said we were redoing our company. So part of redoing it included us going remote. Now, back then, it was not cool to be remote. And so we were hiding it from everybody, right? It was a secret. We pretended it as if we were all in the building, and nobody ever knew that we weren't really all together in one building. Nowadays, it's actually a badge of honor, which is hilarious to me that it's changed so much. But in 2009, it was like if someone found out we're remote, they were like, "Oh, you go." They thought maybe we were a risk to go out of business, or so. It was really, really weird. The thing I tell people about being remote, whether it's right now because you have to, maybe it's because you want to later on, maybe you're in some sort of hybrid version of this, Europe's going backwards, the United States is going backwards and with COVID cases. So I think remote work is going to be here for a while, and in mass. But what I always tell people, remote work is, for me, better. There are certain jobs that you can't be remote, right? You got to make wine in a vineyard. You got to make the airplane in the hangar, right? There are jobs that require you to be together. But most jobs you can be remote. And I think being remote is actually better for everyone if you know how to do it. And the caveat here, the asterisk is remote work is better if your culture is good. Because if your culture is bad, remote work is like the worst thing that can happen to you. Because you can't, if your culture is being crappy and walking around and being, managing people through fear and intimidation and micromanaging and being on top of it, that's how you manage, that's your culture. And now you send them home. You can't see them. You can't manipulate them. You can't yell at them when you need something, right? You can't bring them in your office to make yourself feel important. If that's your culture, remote work, you just blow up. You'll be gone, right?
I love that one. I love that one. So there's many like dysfunctional companies that went under maybe with COVID, right?
Yeah,
That's
they
good
did.
because maybe they shouldn't be there.
They
I love that.
right?
Yeah, they shouldn't. For sure, they shouldn't. I love that one. And the thing with with remote work, when I have been talking about this, the thing, and I say that for me, COVID, the two major things, as I see it made us discover that we could actually work from home. I always thought that it was this kind of thing that I said I will work from home, and then when I was at home, I worked, but not as efficient as I should, because I had so many distraction. I had all my toys, I have all the things, So, and I realized like after like 1 week or something, like how fast I had adapted and how productive I was. After 1 month, I realized I don't want to return to office like 100%. I want to be home for minimum 2 days a week. That was like my biggest revelation, actually. And then I realized that leaders that thought that people that said that they wanted to work from home 1 day a week or something, they thought that, oh, he's going to work on his hobby. They didn't trust people that said that they were going to work from home. And now they realize people can be very, very productive from home, actually.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that people are actually doing really well right now. And right now is not normal remote work. This is remote work with a pandemic. And so your spouse is home, your kids are home, maybe your grandparent or a parent is living with you. That's not normal. So can you imagine how much better it's going to be if the kids are actually back at school and maybe your spouse isn't home all the time and you're not home all the time? Like remote work actually gets 100 times better, even though a lot of people are saying, I kind of like this. This is great. I don't have a commute. I get more time with the family. All of the annoying parts of remote work right now are going to disappear when COVID goes away. And that's just going to take it to another level.
Yeah, I remember the first time because that was when the kindergarten also like closed, right? So we were home with the children, I think like 2 months or something before they open again. And I remember it was nightmare, to work. Yeah. And my children are like 3 and 5, and my son, he's like Eduardo, but that has like taken 10 Red Bulls or something. He's all over the map, he's like hanging on the ceiling. He's like running away with my webcam. He's like everywhere, So for me, it was like what happened was that the company or the leaders at our company, Framtid, they started to have this kind of attitude that they said that we understand you, we understand you. And when I felt that they had this kind of sending this kind of signal, like that they were not like pushing us that you need to do that and that and that with the situation that we had, I felt so strong alignment with the company, and that's the thing. I think it's important for leaders to understand that they must show this kind of care, and true, genuine care about the employees in the situation that they are, and reflect that to them, because like that is how you get loyalty. You know that I'm a loyal person. I really like loyalty, and how you get Eduardo's loyalty is like give with your heart. You know, like be honest, be kind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just the simple stuff that make the hugest difference.
And I know that you have an event coming called Leading a Hybrid Team. When is that event?
Yeah, so the webinar is in a week here, the 18th, I think, and it's a free webinar. It's if anyone would like to join, it's leading a hybrid team. So we're seeing some people are going back to work and mixing their teams. So if you want to go to chrisdyer.com, then under the resources, there's a webinar area, and that you can find it, and you can register there, or connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever social media platform you're on, where you can find me, and I can get you the link. But there's working normal, and then there's working all remote, and I think there's going to be a lot of people doing a little bit of both, and so there are some differences in that different model, right? In that third model that I want to talk about and try to help people understand, so they don't have to go through some of the heartache that other companies have gone through. They can make that transition easily. They can learn the things they need to learn. Hopefully we can get them far enough. And if we don't get them far enough and anyone needs my help, and additionally as a consultant or to come in and do trainings with their team, I'm always happy to do that as well.
You have also the Chris Dyer remote leadership course that I found very interesting. Could I share that on the screen?
Sure, of course. Yeah. So I did about 70 engagements, 70 consultings and trainings from the time COVID started till about maybe a month and a half ago. And I realized that I was pretty much training them a lot of the same things over and over and over again. So I actually did all the videos, created an entire course. So if somebody wants to come in and take this course, in fact, any of your listeners, if they want to, I'll give you a 50% off coupon right now. So if you go on and you buy it, and you use the code CD50, my initials CD50, that should give you 50% off that course. Just for anyone listening to Eduardo Live can access that. But it's I think there's like 75 videos, but they're small. They're like 2-3 minutes. It's small little bite-sized lessons that you can watch as you want, ingest. It's not me talking for hours on end. I mean, it's a little, and they're all categorized. You can learn as you want. You can bounce around. You don't have to listen to in order. You can go where you want to go, where it's important for you, and get all of the things that you need to know as a leader, right? How to lead a remote team, all the things we talked about today, but in much more detail and with better sort of maybe delivery, intentional delivery for someone who's trying to learn it.
And there's also, I saw that it was like 296 students, right?
Yeah, we've had quite a few students in there, and it's been great. So we've had some larger companies come in and purchase it for all of their leaders, and their leaders are coming in and going through it, and yeah, it's been really fun.
So you're also joining a network, you could say, also, right?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I have a remote work book coming out next year, and we will be launching a Slack community as well. So that's if anyone wants to get in there, we aren't quite live yet, but if you want to be a part of that community as it begins to formulate, it's remoteworkmovement.slack.com. So if you want to get into that Slack community, and as people begin to pop in there, and it's really going to be about sharing the best ideas about remote work and sharing ideas and talking about how we're taking ideas and expanding on them. It's really a place to help each other get better. It's not about networking so much. I mean, I'm sure some of that will happen. It's not really about finding anybody a job. It's more about, hey, I'm doing this thing. Maybe I meet with my team once a week, and I noticed if I do it, like this is really works really well for us, and you share that experience, and other people can learn from it.
Nice. You heard it right here on eduardo.live. I'm going to join the course. Join with me. I will add the link to the event also on the post. And yeah, we're getting close now, Chris. So Anything you would like to share with the users about company culture or remote work or some other thing that could be interesting?
Just remember that there is probably more to do with culture and people stuff than you could ever probably write down or ever think about doing. So that can feel very overwhelming. Again, go back and prioritize. What do you do well? Where are you doing the worst? Focus on where you're doing the worst first. Right? So you get the most kind of bang for your buck, the most movement. But as you go along, I love to set this goal of getting 1% better. Now you can decide in what time frame. Is that 1% a day? Is that 1% a week? 1% a month? 1% a year? But how do you get 1% better? And it's a really attainable goal. If you ask your team, how do we get 1% better this month at whatever that thing is, transparency, at customer service, at positivity, at whatever you want. It's so easy for people to go, well, I can do 1%, right? I can think about how to get a little bit better. But when we go to people and we say, I have this giant initiative and we're going to do all these giant things and it's this huge change we're going to make, it's overwhelming, it's tiring, it's frustrating, it never sticks, people don't believe it, they get skeptical. But if you just say, hey, can you help me get a little bit better, right? This is how the best, most talented people, whether it's in music, in sports, in leadership, right? No one goes from being a beginner cello player to Yo-Yo Ma in one swoop or in 1 month or in 1 year, right? You got to learn, get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better all the time. And you're building up. And before you know it, all those little 1% betters that you did turn into something really big, but they didn't feel big, right? They didn't feel hard. They felt easy. So go back and think about it in a little micro bits and little tiny improvements, and you'll find it so much easier for everyone to be connected, to go along, to get better, and to get buy-in, right? For people to see what's in it for them.
I love that one. I usually always say like baby steps. Any project I do, I say like baby steps, baby step, baby step. Because we humans, we have this tendency to overcomplicate thing, you know. And sometimes we even overcomplicate the wrong thing, you know. I was in one of these companies that I was like having a project in. I asked them about, okay, where are your values? How do you work with like vision and mission and all these kind of things, you know? And they looked at me very proud and they said, yeah, Eduardo, we did this amazing project, you know, and we defined all these beautiful things that you're talking about. And I said, yeah, but tell me, how do you work with it? And they said like, here it is, Eduardo. And then they handed me this little printed thing, like a little book. And they said, here it is, Eduardo. I was like looking at it and I was like, okay, but how do you work with it? They said, but we're done. We did the project. Here are the values. Here are the vision. Here is the mission. I was like, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, it was amazing having you on. You're actually doing the first Empowering Monday. You're my first out on the new Empowering Monday concept. So from all my heart, I thank you. And
I'm honored. Thank you.
I have to say, Chris has been like almost like a mentor to me in many cases. Not only about company culture, but he's a man that always takes his time to answer, to be there for the community, and I truly respect that, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Lean on me, yeah.